welcome. Uh, how's everyone doing? Welcome to the Robby Yung AMA. We're also excited. All the gaming enthusiasts, I'm sure, are excited too. So welcome to everyone. A big welcome to Robby. Thank you so much for being here with us. We're really excited to ask you a couple questions. I know I'm excited to ask you a couple questions. Yeah, perfect. So just a big welcome to everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. Just a little bit of housekeeping to kick things off. I'm going to give a quick introduction to Robby, give a little background to him, and then I'm going to ask him a couple general questions, maybe some questions about Animoca Brands, and then I'll hand over to the floor where you guys can ask some questions. Can you please just raise your hand when you there's a little obviously thing on Zoom that you can raise your hand, and then ask the question in person would be ideal. If you can't for some reason, I'm sure you can just ping it in the chat, but number one would be to please ask Robby a question in person, and I'm sure you'd like to see your beautiful face when you ask the question as well. So over to Robby. Robby, welcome. Robby is a gaming leader, a tech entrepreneur, and an investor. Robby is currently the CEO of Animoca Brands, a world-leading digital entertainment company specializing in blockchain, gamification, artificial intelligence, and other technologies. Titles such as Phantom Galaxy, The Sandbox, F1, Delta Time, and many more have come through Animoca Brands, and one of our own, Footium, which came kind of through the Encode ecosystem and has now been invested in by Animoca Brands. In the last couple of years, Animoca Brands has grown remarkably. Recently, they've completed a capital raise of over $3 million at a pre-money valuation of $5 billion, which is just unbelievable. Robby began his career in technology, building wireless telecom networks in China and Indonesia. Robby co-founded OSMedia Group and Redgate Media, both which he took public on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Robby joined Animoca Brands in 2012 and took over as CEO, and then made the company public in 2015. The last 3 years, Robby has focused on blockchain gaming. Robby has emphasized the creation of an open metaverse that is managed and run by the community. Robby, welcome to the Encode AMA. So how are you doing? So grateful to have you here. And it's an absolute privilege for the team to have you here, and I'm sure kind of the whole Encode ecosystem as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jake. I'm really happy to be here.
So to start off just with some general questions to get to know Robby a bit better. I guess the first question would be, what did you want to do when you were younger, and kind of have you, I wouldn't say lived up to your dreams, but have you matched to your dreams, would be the first kind of general question, I guess, to know Robby a bit better.
Okay, so I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was younger, and thankfully I had an American education, which means I didn't have to actually make up my mind about anything until I was forced to get a job and make a living, because you can manage to get through school without having to decide on anything in the American education system. And I'm contrasting, I live in Europe now, where you have to make those choices at like the age of 15. So I think, I began in my career in tech. I've been in tech for 30 years now, and I think that my goal, having sort of cut my teeth in the beginnings of the internet in the 90s, was always to try to make an impact. I think that's all we ever wanted to do. And if you're lucky, you make a little bit of money along the way. And I think that I'm quite excited because it's taken a while, but I feel like being involved in the intersection of blockchain and games and entertainment now, we actually have a chance to make quite a big impact, on not just the way people consume entertainment, but on the way that they consume just about everything on the internet.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I guess you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you joined Animoca Brands in 2012. You then became the CEO. How did this all come about? How did you kind of get into the gaming space?
So I got into the space because Yat Siu, who's the chairman and co-founder of the business, He and I are old friends. We started our first internet startups back in '97 in Hong Kong when the startup scene there was very small. And we had two of probably 30 or 40 companies, maybe, or not even that many, but there were about four. Let's just put it this way. We used to meet up every week, all the founders of web startup companies, and we'd meet in somebody's boardroom of wherever they had their day jobs that they were still working at, some big company. And so the startup community all fit in somebody's boardroom. So that pretty much tells you how big the ecosystem was in Hong Kong at the time. And so we used to, trade stories and trade introductions to investors or VCs or angels. We would meet and just try to help each other out. And it's interesting because, when we fast forward 25 years, that's exactly how it feels to be in the blockchain business now. And I find a lot of sort of spiritual connection with people who built companies in the internet space back in the 90s, because I think the ethos at collaboration and openness and sharing and trying to have a bit of social impact along the way, I think is very similar.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that maybe opens up to who Robby is and how he got into the space. I think maybe diving a little deeper into Animoca Brands. Maybe this is a bit of a difficult question, but I think in 2020, Animoca Brands was delisted off the Australian Securities Exchange, if I'm correct. I guess what were the ramifications? I mean, you got valued so highly recently. So what were the ramifications of this delisting? And maybe do you think this kind of will become a trend within, I guess, crypto-heavy VCs in the future?
So I think, I don't know that it will become a trend. We didn't do it intentionally, but this was a circumstance where essentially I think the regulators they didn't really know what to do with us and many other companies in the blockchain space, because we were an existing listed company and we pivoted to blockchain to focus on it. And I think the regulators didn't know, they didn't have a playbook as to how to deal with companies that held tokens and owned tokens and how that was going to be treated for publicly disclosed financial statements and things. And so because there was no framework, I think they decided that it was just safer to take these companies off the exchange rather than figure out how to deal with them. And so that's what happened. And we were one of many companies in Australia that received that kind of treatment. I think in hindsight, that was probably a bit of a blessing for us, because I think it would have been very challenging to grow as quickly as we have over the last 5 years, as a public company in the public spotlight, just because particularly in Australia, there are a lot of disclosure requirements. For example, every time you make an investment or an acquisition, you have to have your press releases approved by the exchange in advance. And so just the logistics, literally, of doing that on a regular basis is very high. And so I think, we've benefited from the speed and efficiency of being a quasi-private company over the last few years.
Perfect. That's really insightful. And I guess kind of through, I mean, Animoca Brands valuation was fairly big recently, and I think it kind of shows the general size of the gaming space within blockchain and within, I guess, outside of blockchain as well. And I guess this ties quite a bit into the metaverse and what the future holds there. And I think maybe quite a few people, I categorize myself here, don't fully understand what the metaverse kind of entails. So I guess the first question would be, can you maybe explain the metaverse to us simpletons? And then the second question would be, I guess the metaverse is fairly looked at as is more in the NFT gaming space. So what would the future hold there? But what would the future kind of, I wouldn't say more importantly, but maybe hold for like DeFi and real world applications? Kind of, if you got my two parts of the question there.
Sure, no problem. So I think the first thing is, how would we think about defining the metaverse? And so I like to use an analogy to the physical world. I think because that's easier to digest. We have a well-known project called The Sandbox, which is a user-generated content environment, and it's a free-form open space similar to a Minecraft or a Roblox. And So because it's a big space and it has land and you can buy and sell land and build things on it and build games inside it, people often ask me, so is that the metaverse? You know, are you building the metaverse inside the sandbox? And my answer to them is that it's part of the metaverse, but it's not the metaverse. The metaverse, in my mind, is the idea of a shared and collaborative internet that interoperates, that works together. So, you know, you can argue that massive multiplayer online games, things like Fortnite or Minecraft or Roblox, are metaverses, but in my mind, they're not the metaverse until they actually talk to and connect to each other. They're just little islands. And so they're individual islands, but they're not part of the metaverse. So if you make the analogy to the physical world, I see the sandbox, for example, as being a city, you know, like New York or London or Tokyo. And we hope that the sandbox is such a, you know, big and renowned and popular city. But there will be many of them. And so just like there are Decentraland and, you know, all kinds of other similar land-based metaverses, there's just as there are cities in the world, but that the entire metaverse is the aggregate of all of those individual places. And the important part is that we can move from one to the other and we can bring our stuff from one to the other. And I think that's the real sort of sea change here.
Yeah. And so how would you see the metaverse progressing outside of NFTs and gaming?
Sure. So I think the exciting thing is that tokenization and blockchain underpins the functionality of the metaverse. So it enables you to have a transactional layer where you can exchange economic value, you can codify property ownership, so that basically your piece of the metaverse that you exploit can be done so for your benefit or for whatever benefit you choose. So the property ownership is very important, and that's what blockchain and NFTs confer. I think beyond that, it doesn't necessarily have to be strictly about entertainment. It can be about commerce, you know, it can be about, you know, the creator economy. It can be about DeFi and financial services. The cool part is because they're all fundamentally tokenized and on blockchain, you can connect all of these things together. So there's no reason why you can't have a game and then have an ATM connected to DeFi inside your game so that you could replenish your wallet with more money. Or you can have, you know, a museum inside your game where you can go and bid on artwork in an auction format. All of these things can be interconnected because they're on blockchain. And sorry, let me rephrase that. Not because they're on blockchain, but they're better because they're on blockchain because of the transactional capability. You could do that on the internet, obviously.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That's really, yeah, I gave a good definition of the metaverse. And I think as a DeFi enthusiast, I have a kind of a good, I guess, picture of what the future might hold. I think this is kind of the inner fan coming out in me, so excuse me, but I guess it'd be criminal not to mention Snoop Dogg and The Sandbox. So I guess my next question I'll tie it into a bigger question, but I mean, how did kind of the connection between Snoop Dogg and The Sandbox come about? Was it a marketing stunt? Was it purely by luck? And then I guess the next question would be kind of what influence has Snoop Dogg, but maybe kind of influences as a whole, had on the metaverse and maybe had on The Sandbox as well?
Sure. I think the great thing about Snoop Dogg, like Snoop Dogg fundamentally these days, I think we would consider him an influencer. So obviously he's a well-known musician. He has a, you know, he's a celebrity, but in the world of online spaces, he's an influencer because he has a following, he has a fan base, and his fans are interested in things that he does. And so I think it's through that lens that we view his collaboration in The Sandbox, because his content really resonates with the Sandbox community. And I think this is important because it gets to the heart of what I think makes Web3 applications successful, which is community. And we talk a lot about this, and it's not to be underestimated, but engaging with the community is the most important thing when it comes to building a successful blockchain game or you know, Web3 experience. And Snoop understands how to engage his fans and his community. And so what we did was, through the Sandbox, we carefully sort of curated a series of different fan engagements. We created a club where where he can host live events and meetups with fans. We created avatars so that people, who can't go to live events can still express their fandom through avatars. And so we created a variety of different ways that fans can engage. And then most importantly, Snoop himself spends time to do so. And he reinforces that, because it's no good to just have a simple branding exercise and slap your name on something. To be an influencer, you need to be engaged and be out there shaking the hands of your fans, so to speak. And I think he's been fantastic at doing that. And that's why it's been successful and resonated, because he's really himself gotten engaged properly.
Yeah, I think he is fabulous at marketing himself. So I completely agree with you there. I mean, I think that's why we're all such big fans of Snoop Dogg. You don't come across a lot of people that aren't fans of Snoop Dogg. Yes. Yeah. This is kind of what I was doing a bit of research, and I found this kind of statement. I don't know how true it is. So you can also correct me if I'm wrong once again. But you spoke about this creation of an open metaverse managed by and run by the community. Is that correct? First of all, before I go on with my question.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. And then so I guess that will kind of go, where do you currently, and maybe where do you want to see the relationship, I guess, between DAOs and kind of the gaming community, or just games in general? I think that's maybe quite interesting to me to
Sure.
have something a bit more developer driven, while maybe in Web2 kind of games were maybe not kind of, I would say, run by developers, or was maybe run from more of the marketing side.
So I think what we're seeing now is that the ability to have ownership of things that's conferred by blockchain and NFTs, its logical extension is the idea that fans and the community, the players, the gamers, can actually take ownership in the games. And once they take ownership in the games and the game becomes about catering to the community, you have to start to listen to what the community says. In traditional games, for a while now, we've had, discords, and we've had chat rooms, and there have been ways to engage with community, and you've had, community managers who listen to feedback and fix bugs and this kind of thing. But I think in the blockchain world, we've really taken it up to the next level, so that the community is actively engaged in helping to chart the path or the course of the evolution of the product. And I think that this is actually a really positive step, because at the end of the day, if the community, is influencing the direction of travel of the product, then it's a reasonable assumption that the product will sell, because it's what the community is demanding. So it's kind of, you're getting real-time feedback and real-time focus grouping from the actual customers. I think the challenge becomes for the game developer to really balance how much of the community, community input to take on board versus your vision as the developer and the professional of what you know to be the right product. You can think of it like a chef, the chef knows how to make a fantastic meal based on experience, but you as the customer may prefer something a little bit saltier, for example. And you may get into an argument with the chef over how much salt to add to the dish, right? And so I think it's the same when it comes to thinking about games. And that's why we see DAOs, for example, as an evolution of gaming, but it's not, in our opinion, something where you should just make a game and it should be run by a DAO from day one, because democracy is messy business, as anybody who lives in a Western country will tell you. And, sometimes it's helpful for there to be structures that people get accustomed to, an organization that they get accustomed to before they take on more leadership and governance responsibilities, because not everybody wants to be involved in governance either. Some people just want to come and play. So I think that, with a lot of our games, the intention is to transition them over time to community ownership. That's true of everything that we do in this space, but that it is a process that has to happen over time once the projects are mature and the community is stable.
Perfect. Yeah, that's as I said again, really insightful. And I agree with kind of DAOs. I think having some sort of leadership is always crucial, especially when I guess the person knows what they're speaking about a bit more than you know what you're speaking about. I would have kind of two more questions, and then I'll hand over to the floor. And I think this will be kind of more investment-driven questions.
Mm-hmm.
The first would tie in together, I guess. What are you looking for in an investment when you want to kind of invest in a company, or you're searching for a company? I'm sure you have tons of people helping you out, and kind of how is the portfolio balanced? Is it fully gaming balanced, or are you kind of diversifying outside of the gaming sphere?
Okay, so I think a couple of things. First, in terms of the investments we make, it's not just gaming, although gaming is the biggest part of it. But we do invest in other things that are, adjacent and related to gaming. So everything from DeFi to art to education, just because there are aspects of those that are related to gaming, and we can interoperate some of that content together with gaming. In terms of what we look for in investments, I think, like every investor out there, we're always focused on the team first and foremost, and the vision of the team, and whether we feel like the team has an understanding of what they want to build and how to get to that goal. And we're also looking for, particular types of people, because we're in a very new sector. And so being able to innovate and to pivot quickly and to be creative, and to be able to create solutions to problems that have never been seen before is part of what makes you successful in this field. Unlike more mature industries where you can, copy successful examples and make modest innovations to have a more reliable outcome, I think in our business, it's all about just trying new things and experimenting until we find what works. And if you look at most of the successful products out there, very few of them do not have any technology in them that has literally been invented by the team for the purpose of their product. And I think we're still very much at that phase in the industry.
Yeah. Perfect. And I think the last question from my side before we hand over to the floor would be kind of what books or materials, it's a classic ask me anything question, but what books and materials would you suggest to people to follow in your footsteps? And if it's not a book or material, maybe what kind of, can I say, lifestyle? Maybe lifestyle would be a good thing to add.
The only book I can think of, honestly, is kind of the gateway drug to metaverses, which is Snow Crash, and so that would be the original, book where the term was coined. But it's a great way to get exposure to the idea of what the dream of a metaverse might be like, meaning an online shared space that you can pretty much conduct your whole life in if you choose to do so. But I think otherwise, obviously, spend a lot of time on the internet, in Discords and chat rooms and on Twitter, because as people might know, crypto Twitter is the most active and enthusiastic part of Twitter. So I think those are great places to learn from other people, because I think one part of the ethos of the blockchain space is that people are very open to sharing and happy to share their ideas and their opinions with you.
Yeah, as someone I'd say fairly new to the crypto space, Twitter has definitely been my biggest source of information and learning. So I completely agree with you there. So we currently have two questions from the floor. First up is George. Would you like to ask Robby something?
Sure. Hey, Robby, thanks a lot for your time. George from Footium here. I wanted to ask around, obviously in crypto, there's so many projects coming up every day, it seems. So how, as an investor, do you kind of cut through the noise for those projects and find ones that you really want to invest in?
Good question. So I think on the one hand, there are things that we are interested in seeking out. So, we as a company would like to have exposure in many different kinds of gameplay genres. And so we do have a little bit of an internal wish list of things that we may not have investments in, We also pursue a multi-chain strategy. So we're interested in supporting people building on all different kinds of blockchains. And so we're actively looking for exposure in the places where we're not present, because we'd like to have complete coverage across the industry. And I think that one of the things that I've noticed in this past quarter is the maturity level of companies that I'm seeing has changed a lot. So I'm seeing a lot of companies now that have, reasonable MVPs, and the team is onboarded. They may have their first NFT drop under their belts, and they have some basic gameplay out. Whereas last year it was still mostly things at concept stage. So I think we can afford to be a little bit choosier now, because there are more people coming into the space, which is a fantastic thing.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like the whole space is becoming a lot more developed, and there's a lot of actual games to play now, rather than just envision what they might look like. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Perfect. Thanks, George. Great question. Oliver, over to you.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Robby. Nice to hear your thoughts on these things. I had a two-part question. Considering your background, I was interested in knowing what it was that made you choose to move into gaming. And the second part is related, which is, what do you see as being the social and societal impact of games going forward?
Sure. So I chose to go into gaming because it, oddly enough, and this was specifically mobile gaming at the time, it seemed kind of like the confluence of everything I'd ever done. So I started my career in telecoms, in wireless telecoms. I spent, time 4 or 5 years in the web, and then I spent a decade in traditional ad-supported media, so TV, outdoor, radio, etc. And mobile games seem to be all of those things in one product. It's mobile, it's advertising, it's content, it's the internet in one platform. So that I thought was quite cool. And at the time that I joined, the App Store on iOS was just, taking off, and Android had not yet started. So I thought that the timing was interesting as well. I think in terms of the long-term societal impact of games, I think the interesting thing is we're slowly making that transition now, the more we use the term metaverse, to stop calling them games, because I think they're just going to become online experiences of different types, and some of them will be. That's why I often refer to ourselves as an entertainment company rather than strictly a game company, because we're going to go into online spaces and watch a film together. We're going to go into online spaces and listen to music and chat, and we're going to go into online spaces and work. And those can all happen inside, for example, I'm going to plug our sandbox, inside a place like the Sandbox. So is it a game? Don't know. But that's why we're using the term metaverse as a kind of a catch-all, because you can live, play, work, and do all those things there. So I think it will have a dramatic societal effect. But one thing I would say is that it's going to be something that supplements your everyday physical existence. The intention here is not for us to spend 20 hours a day staring into screens. I mean, we probably do already anyway, but forgetting that part, I think the idea is that we can just do so many more things online than we could before. And that's one of the reasons why, frankly, the pandemic has accelerated this transition, because I think people by no fault of their own have been forced to adopt this kind of transition, because honestly, what we're doing right here on Zoom, this is the metaverse.
Yeah, I definitely see your point about games being more than just how they have been traditionally thought of. So yeah, looking forward to seeing these evolutions. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Perfect. Thank you, Oliver. Good to see a Solana bootcamp attendee here. And Lavender from 7X. Would you like to?
Hey, Robby. Nice meeting you. My name is Lavender from 7X Ventures. We have some overlapping in portfolios. So my question to you is actually, we all know that Sandbox is an amazing metaverse project. Probably it has a lot of innovations, which is quite different from decentralized. That it's a boring space that you can only build something on top, right? And obviously Sandbox is a very, very fun place that you can play with, build and play with. So how will you see the future evolvement of Metaverse? Probably we can call Metaverse Sandbox as Metaverse 2.0, or probably how you are going to see what is going to be the Metaverse 3.0, and what will be some potential opportunities for future metaverses.
Sure. So I think again, I know it's going to get tiresome. I'm going to go back to the idea of community. I think one of the things that distinguishes the Sandbox, I mean, obviously art style, but aside from that, it's really the community, because I have to give credit to the Sandbox team. They've been doing a tireless job for literally 4 years building community around the Sandbox. The product itself may only have launched last November in the alpha stage, but the creator tools, the community, etc., have been building content for it for literally years. And that was built on top of an existing community that played a mobile game, also called the Sandbox, which was the genesis of the entire project. So the original mobile game began a decade ago, and that was created by the same team who always imagined that they wanted to create a 3D version of it. So I think, it's really the fruits of that long-standing investment in community building that they're reaping at the moment, much more so than it is purely technology or blockchain. I think it's just become the perfect time where blockchain has turned out to be the tool of the moment to enable this community of creators to be able to really feel empowered, because we've seen so much success of games like Minecraft and Roblox, where people are building stuff all the time and spending hours and hours enjoying the community and the collaboration aspects of building. And so I think to be able to offer them the tools to do that, where they can also monetize their creations and own their creations, I think was a no-brainer. So blockchain really seemed like a logical way to do that.
Got it. May I ask another question? Probably.
Sure thing.
Okay. Now, with the success of Axie Infinity, and most recently, we can call Stefan as another project that which comes out of the idea of, and how do you see those opportunities fall? I just want to have some of your opinions about what X to earn, those X to earn, the value of those X to earn mechanisms that can bring, because definitely the X to earn is going to bring some money effect to help a project with co-star and to for the bootstrap and onboarded like new users, but when the time the project is going to lose the money effect, then what we can see is the users are leaving the projects or very, very quickly. So I just want to and probably it might not be a question, but it's a discussion, like how do you think of that X to earn mechanism, or what value that it really brings to the game?
Sure. So I think let's take Axie Infinity as an example. So Axie Infinity, I think, is an incredible game, and it's an incredible business. We're now full transparency. We're investors in Sky Mavis, the parent, and so we're happy shareholders. And I think that what they have done is transformative for the game industry, because they've paved a path to a completely new type of business model. And I think what you see in the success and the shifting levels of engagement with the game really reflect the way they engage with different communities at different times. So Axie Infinity has always had a very strong community. And prior to the massive run-up in transaction volume and token prices and things that happened starting around this time last year, they had a very strong community that played the game and loved to breed axes and battle them, etc. And then they, then the guild model was born, which accelerated adoption into the game because it lowered the barrier to entry to buy axes to come into the game. And that innovation is huge because this guild model now will continue to have impact throughout the blockchain game industry for the foreseeable future. And now that people are looking at Axie Infinity and saying, well, not as many people are playing the game anymore, and there's less transaction volume, I don't actually see that as being a sign that there's any problem with the game. I think it's doing what it originally intended to do. Because if you look at a chart of engagement over time and zoom out the time scale to 2 years or 3 years, you'll see it's a very, very healthy game, actually. But there was a period of time last summer when they experienced tremendous traffic of people who came in to participate in the game for a short period of time, speculating on the value of assets. So I think you'll always have those kind of players who can come in and participate for speculative reasons. But you have to balance that out with players who are there for fun and community. And so the challenge for game makers is to be able to cater to all those different kinds of audiences and have a little bit of something for everybody. And the magic that Axie has done is to be able to figure out how to get those different player constituencies to complement each other.
Okay, got it.
Perfect. Thanks, Lavender. Next up is Min. He was actually in our Darknet Hackathon last week, and he pushed an awesome project. So good to see you back, Min.
Hey Jay, thanks. Hi Robby.
Hi.
My name is Min, and I'm running a project called Metaverse, which is an infrastructure for NFT apps, including gaming apps. So basically, we're thinking like, game studio, they should not build their own infrastructure, and they should not study different blockchain ecosystem, and they should not. So we actually building the infrastructure for them so that they can build NFT games easily. So my question, I had 2 questions. So what do you think about the future of gaming with NFT? I think it makes a lot of sense. And how big will be the market for blockchain and game? And do you think like the traditional gaming studio are moving to utilize NFT for their products or not? Yeah, first question. And second question is, so you see the apps after seeing the growth of like GameFi since last year, and the market is kind of like getting a little bit like decrease. So what do you think about us? How do you address this?
Sure. So I think, first of all, I think simply put, I think all games will be blockchain games. The only question is when, not if, in my opinion. I think it's very similar to, the idea of online games. A decade ago, we used to talk about online games because being an online game was a feature, because not all games were online. And at the moment, we talk about blockchain games because not all games are on the blockchain, but I think it will just become part of the infrastructure and the plumbing. And so 5 years from now, games will just be games and they'll all be tokenized. Because I think the fundamental thing that we do in blockchain games is we give digital property rights to gamers. And once you give people property rights, you can't take them away. In the physical world, we call that a revolution. That's what happens when you take away property rights from people. And so I think it's a little bit like being in a rental economy. When you rent an apartment or a house and then you have the opportunity to buy one, the consumer understands what that feeling of ownership is only once they buy it. And once you buy it, then you look back at all the time you spent renting and you ask yourself, well, what was I doing renting that stuff? Because it doesn't make any sense. I don't get to see any of the return on my investment. So it's much better to own than to rent. I think once game consumers understand this, they won't look back. So in my opinion, spending on gaming will increase dramatically because we give property ownership to gamers. I think if you own NFTs, for example, in a game, you're much more likely to spend time in that game and engage with the game. It's an automatic retention mechanism because that's where you own stuff. And and I think that you'll have the tendency, if there's the possibility for you to get any return on your investment, you'll tend to spend more. So for example, if you spend $10 a month on games, and right now, you get zero back because you can't get anything out of a game. If you spend $10 a month on a blockchain game, and there's a chance you can sell your stuff for, 10 cents, or sorry, for $1 rather than 10. Let's forget about the idea of making money. Let's just say you get 10% back. Then I would argue that it's very likely that you will spend 10% more on gaming in the future because you'll get at least 10% back selling your secondhand stuff. And so I think this will have the net effect of increasing the overall demand and investment activity in games by game players. I think going to your second question about engagement levels with games, I think it's premature to really examine closely engagement levels, because honestly, the market of players for blockchain games right now is ridiculously small. We have mobile games that had much bigger audiences than the entire world of blockchain games right now. So I think that I would be reluctant to pass any kind of judgment based on such a small sample size. And I think maybe the best way to look at it is to chart the ongoing success of existing long-term projects to see whether you feel like the communities continue to grow and continue to engage. For me, a very healthy metric is when I look at all of the new products that we have launched over the last 6 months since September, October. Every one of them has had a majority of users onboarded for whom it was the first time they ever bought an NFT or the first time they opened a blockchain wallet. And I think this is really important because it means we're bringing new people into the ecosystem. And I think that's the best sign of health, because I think our goal here is to grow the ecosystem to the point when we have billions of users on blockchain, just the way we do on other gaming platforms.
Perfect. I think that was a phenomenal answer. That's just my opinion. Min, thank you for asking a question. Sina, you are up next.
Hi, Robby. I'm Sina. I'm 25. It's been almost 3 years that I have started my journey on blockchain development. And what I am asking you is that what is your suggestion to a 25-year boy who is trying to become a professional game developer? And finally, I want to some kind of develop and implement my own ideas into decentralized and DAO games. And if you could tell us what are the required stacks that are used in general game development, it would be awesome.
Sure. So I think definitely the fact that you're spending time in it and interested is already half the battle, because I think you're really on the cutting edge of where games are headed. And in fact, if you have some decent development chops in Solidity and Rust, as well as various game development environments like Unity or Unreal, honestly, you can ask for whatever you want to be paid at the moment, because the demand for blockchain game developers is so incredibly high. So I would say on the blockchain side, Solidity and Rust are the most popular. And then in terms of games, Unity and Unreal are the most popular engines. Obviously, a foundation in things like C++ are great. And just get out there and get experience and work on projects, because I think the more you can show having worked on interesting projects, the more that leads to more interesting work, frankly.
Okay, thanks a lot.
No problem.
Perfect. Good to see another boot camper here. Vinicius was also in our accelerator program. He's been in our ecosystem for quite a while. Over to you. Good to see you here.
Good to see you, Jake. Thank you so much. So, Robby, it's a pleasure to see you speaking. Just wondering, ask you about your vision, about how do you see, games in real life, kind of, neuro-linguistic way to, to play with, even with DAO challenge, like to help people take decision in the real life. Kind of, how do you see this, like this, this boundary between the games and the challenge of, live the life itself, kind of make this transition? Because you're gonna have this metaverse, how immersion is all about the you'll be more spending more time in the screen, but how do you see exactly this boundary?
Sure. So I think I hope this addresses your question. I think actually one of the most exciting thematics that I see is financial education, because if you think about what we're doing in blockchain now, giving players and participants ownership rights over content, empowers them. They have to start to make decisions that have real value impact. They have to decide whether they're going to buy and sell things, and quickly you end up falling down, as I'm sure Jake has, down the DeFi rabbit hole, because once you buy a few NFTs and some tokens, then all of a sudden you want to yield farm and you want to stake them and you want to do all kinds of things because you realize that there's this incredible world of financial information and financial services. And so I think that what we see is an incredible opportunity for younger generations to become very, very fluent in the language of finance and managing their own finances. And this is something that, at least for myself, having grown up in a Western country, I found that the Western education system and culture often, it's kind of taboo to talk about finance. You don't talk about how much money you make, and you don't talk about your salary or things like that, because it's considered to be impolite. And I think that this actually really ends up with a generation of children that's ill-prepared to manage their own finances in life, which is unfortunate. And I think that actually we have an opportunity here through game and entertainment experiences to empower kids to really start to understand the implication of financial decisions they make for themselves. Because if you as a kid can work your way through Axie Infinity as a successful player, then for sure you're going to be far better suited to your first job and managing financial decision making than I was for the first 10 years of my career. That's for sure.
Thank you.
No problem.
Awesome.
Thanks, Vinicius. Mohak, you're on.
Yep. Thanks. Hi, Robby. My question is more towards from the perspective of indie developers and smaller developer companies in the gaming space. Because traditionally with gaming, there's the premium models, there's the freemium model, and then there's the free model. So how do you see for the smaller players of the ecosystem, where would the fit, and like moving forward, what does that imply, in the blockchain gaming space for these smaller developers?
Sure. I think the blockchain game space is the best thing that ever could have happened to small developers. And I say that because we've been a small developer for years, and now we're, a medium to large size developer. But to be honest, we're still probably a medium-sized developer. And I think the reason that this has been so great is because blockchain games are not necessarily any more expensive to make than any other type of games. Unless you're seeking AAA console quality, you can build a blockchain game with a very small team, just like you can with any mobile game. But you have a way to engage with players and to build an ecosystem on the financial backbone of blockchain that can give you a very successful product that has a different financial trajectory. So for example, if you look at your typical blockchain game project, often it starts with an NFT drop, because there's this concept in the game, in the industry, that's taken hold over the last several years of selling content in advance of the launch of the game itself. And it serves several purposes. It's a great way to community build. It's a great way to engage fans and get them excited about the upcoming game, because the reality is games take a while to develop and nobody wants to wait around until the game is ready. So it's a way to start engaging with fans in advance of the launch of the game. But at the same time, obviously, it brings revenue across. And that's very helpful as an indie game studio to fund your ongoing development costs, because you're actually starting to generate revenue and build sales in advance of the launch of the game. So you're no longer then dependent on raising money from somebody else or bootstrapping up until the launch of the game. So I think that's really, really helpful for indie game developers.
Cool. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. Good to see another bootcamper out here representing well. Thanks. Raul, over to you.
Yeah, so I have a question, but it's not exactly related to the game industry itself. It's more towards like just a base product that could be built in the Web3 space. So it's like if we are building a product and we want to make sure that we have some insights about the product, the way we do it in the Web2 space by storing all kind of events in the database. So I had these questions before also, but I didn't get the right answer. So it's like if we are combining the data of the Web3 product analytics with the Web2 infra, will that still be like a Web3 product, or will it be more of the Web2 product just with some built on top of some kind of blockchain?
So I think the important part is trying to take advantage of as much of the on-chain data as possible, because that really, is maximizing your investment in blockchain. And I think the exciting part is to think about how you can build your product taking into account the availability of on-chain data from everybody else's products. Because, one of the things that's always been difficult about closed systems in Web 2 is, for example, we used to develop lots of mobile games. If we wanted information about how other games in the App Store were performing, we literally had to subscribe to paid services of other companies that track those things, because there was no other way to find the data. It's literally, closed off. And frankly, even data about our own customers, if you ask Apple for the data, you're not going to get it because they don't share it with you. And so this is something that I think was always opaque by design, because there are ways to profit from that data. In terms of on-chain data in Web3, I think the exciting thing is to think about being able to track not just the data in your own product, but in everybody else's products, and how that might have influence on acquiring users or bringing people in to encourage them to track how they enjoy the experience that you're creating. Because thanks to the fact that all the data is open and transparent, you can actually track wallets and NFT owners as they travel around the metaverse, across from other people's experience. And that's something that we've never had access to before. And the cool part is that everybody has access to the same data. So it's kind of a level playing field there.
Yeah, that's, I have another question. So like this question was raised by one of the guys that I met during the meetup. So it was like they were building a product and they asked me like if we can do something like a private blockchain just for a company to track their own expenses, so that they don't want others to see that. Does that works out in the Web3 space, or is it like just still a Web2 one?
Sure. Well, I think first, blockchains can be closed as well as open. There's no reason why not. And I think that having a closed blockchain for a company intranet or something where there's a security concern absolutely makes sense, where it's just simply an internal service. I think when it's a public product, that's where we believe very strongly that it should be open and transparent, because we think that that actually benefits the ecosystem and ultimately the product itself, because there is a network effect to the interoperability of products. But if it's simply an internal enterprise solution, then yeah, absolutely. There's no reason why you wouldn't want to use blockchain technology where it's applicable.
Yeah, thanks. That's for me.
Thanks, Raul. Good to see you as well. Robby, I think we'll have one more question maybe in the chat and then we'll call it there. We have a question from Rebecca. Do you have any concerns around centralization with some blockchains where a lot of games are being built, such as Binance Smart Chain?
So I think, as I've mentioned, our concern is always about openness. So I think, and in full disclosure, we build on Binance and work closely with them. So, I don't have a particular axe to grind there. We're big supporters of the Binance ecosystem. I think that as we are with Flow, for example, which also has ways in which it can be deployed in a private or semi-private and a public way. We do think openness is very important. We understand that there are situations where closed or semi-closed environments, have a purpose, at least in the transition to fully open blockchains, because this is a big change that we're undergoing in terms of how we view the sharing of information. And so this transition has to be taken, one step at a time. But I think once we get companies comfortable with the idea of openness and transparency, they'll see the benefits of it, frankly. But I think that one of the things that's important is to continue to build bridges and interoperability between the various chains, because I think that ultimately people are less concerned about what chain their information is on, and then the portability of that NFT, for example, or that token from one place to another, because at the end of the day, utility is all about how many different places you can use that object.
That was a very interesting answer, but I think it was a good question to end on as well. Yeah, Robby, thank you so much for coming, taking up your time. I'm sure you're a very, very busy man. From a personal perspective, I think you answered a lot of questions around kind of the gaming, I would say, space within crypto. As I said, as you heard before, I'm a DeFi man, and hopefully kind of for the Encode community, thank you so much for being here, and I hope you learned a whole ton as well. Yeah, so a big thank you, Robby. That was thoroughly enjoyable.
No problem.
A bit of a highlight in my Encode career so far. Yeah, so thank you to everyone that asked questions, and yeah, thank you so much for coming. Big thank you, Robby.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me. Thank you, everyone, for coming.